Today, we're going to dive into one of history's most fascinating and terrifying figures, Pablo Escobar. He was both a monster and somehow a beloved folk hero. It's a contradiction that's become a legend.
So that's the big question, right? How does one guy end up as a community savior to some and a straight-up terrorist to others? It's a paradox that honestly starts with the country he was born into. To really get Escobar, you have to understand the world that created him. In mid-20th century Colombia, it was pure chaos. I mean, it was the perfect breeding ground for someone who didn't play by the rules.
It all kicked off in 1948. A liberal political leader was assassinated, and the country just exploded into a decade-long civil war they called La Violencia. The government basically collapsed. It was the law of the jungle, and violence became the only real way to get things done.
And the human toll was just staggering. We're talking over 200,000 people killed. And into this brutal, chaotic world, Pablo Escobar was born in 1949. You couldn't have designed a more perfect youth academy for an outlaw.
So how does a poor kid from this violent landscape become the most powerful drug lord on the planet? Well, he started small, but he always thought big. He approached crime like he was building a Fortune 500 company.
You can actually see his ambition in his early crimes. First, it was smuggled cigarettes. Then, he moved up to fake lottery tickets. He even robbed graves to resell the tombstones. Each step got bolder, and soon, he graduated to full-on car theft. But his real break was just around the corner.
And here it is. In 1971, the U.S. declared its war on drugs. But it had this massive unintended consequence. Yeah, it choked off some supply lines, but it made American demand for cocaine go through the roof. Suddenly, there was this huge, incredibly profitable market just waiting to be tapped. And the product itself was surprisingly simple to make. You take coca leaves, you mix them with stuff like kerosene to make a paste, and then you refine that paste into pure cocaine powder. But Escobar saw something others didn't. The real money wasn't just in making it. It was in controlling every single step of the process.
And just look at these numbers. The profit margins were absolutely insane. A kilo of leaves that cost less than $400 in Peru could turn into a product worth $100,000 on the streets in the US. When Escobar saw that, that was it. He pivoted his entire operation to cocaine.
Now here's his genius move. Instead of fighting with the other traffickers, he brought them all together. In 1976, he founded the Medellin cartel. And you have to understand, this was not a street gang. It was a corporation, a sophisticated, vertically integrated business designed for one thing: total control and maximum profit. Okay, so the business is set up. Now he needs to protect it. And he did that with a terrifyingly simple philosophy, which he then combined with a shockingly bold move into the world of politics.
His entire empire ran on one chilling principle: plata o plomo, silver or lead, money or bullets. Early in his career, he got arrested, so he bribed the judge to get off and then had the cops who arrested him murdered. That became the playbook. If you're a politician, a judge, a cop, anyone who stood in his way, you had a choice: take the bribe or take a bullet. Simple as that.
And, well, it worked. By the 1980s, the Medellin cartel wasn't just another player in the game. It was the game. They controlled an unbelievable 80% of the entire global cocaine market. He truly was the king of cocaine. That kind of dominance meant wealth that is just hard to even wrap your head around. At its absolute peak, the cartel was pulling in an estimated $70 million a day. They were spending over $1,000 a week just on rubber bands to wrap all the cash. So what do you do with that kind of money? You try to buy legitimacy. When the government considered signing an extradition treaty with the U.S., Escobar made this incredible offer. He said, "I will personally pay off Colombia's entire national debt, all $10 billion of it, if you kill the treaty." He was trying to frame himself as a patriot saving the country. The government refused his offer, and the plomo that followed was a national nightmare. He had the Minister of Justice assassinated. He funded an attack on the Palace of Justice that killed half of the Supreme Court. He murdered a leading presidential candidate, and he bombed a civilian airliner, killing 107 completely innocent people just to try and kill one informant. This wave of pure terror was the turning point. The Colombian state, with a lot of help from the U.S., declared all-out war. But first, Escobar cut one of the most bizarre surrender deals you'll ever hear about. So Escobar surrendered, but on one condition. He got to build his own prison. He called it La Catedral, but it was more like a luxury fortress. It had a jacuzzi, a bar, a soccer field. He even handpicked his own guards. It was a joke. He was running his entire empire from inside his prison. But the whole charade fell apart when he had two of his own lieutenants tortured and murdered right there, inside La Catedral. That was too much, even for the government. They decided to move him to a real prison. But when they showed up, Escobar just walked out an escape tunnel he'd built and vanished. And his escape kicked off the biggest manhunt in history. Seriously, it was the entire world versus one man. You had the Colombian military, the US DEA, a US-trained elite police unit called the Search Block, and even a brutal vigilante group called Los Pepes, which was funded by all of his rivals. On December 2nd, 1993, the hunt finally came to an end on a rooftop in Medellin. But Escobar's death wasn't the end of his story. Not even close. His ghost and his deeply contradictory legacy still haunt Colombia to this day. And this brings us right back to the paradox. On one hand, you have the Robin Hood Escobar, the guy who built hospitals, schools, and entire neighborhoods for the poorest people in Medellin. But on the other, you have the terrorist who murdered thousands, crippled the national economy, and plunged his country into violence. And his economic legacy is still alive and well. Decades after his death, the machine he built is still chugging along. As of 2022, Colombia's illegal drug trade is still worth an estimated $18 billion a year. That's a direct line back to the systems he created. So in the end, it all comes back to this one impossible question. He was a ruthless killer, but he was also a philanthropist. He was a narco-terrorist, but some still call him a saint. It forces us to ask, can building a school ever wash away the blood from bombing an airplane? Can a legacy of pure terror ever truly be redeemed by charity?